quiet evening takes a harrowing turn when a racist gang targets a retired black Marine and his wife, unaware of their unshakable resilience. As tensions escalate, the couple fights back with courage, strategy, and a shocking twist that leaves the attackers begging for mercy. Witness a powerful tale of strength, unity, and justice that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, tell us, where are you watching from? Share in the comments below. The cool evening air carried a peaceful calm as Logan Carter drove through the quiet streets of Ashton, a small southern town divided more by unspoken prejudice than visible lines. The faint hum of cicadas accompanied the low rumble of the truck's engine as Logan glanced at his wife, Vanessa, sitting beside him. Her sharp eyes scanned the road ahead, her presence as steady and strong as his. Logan, a retired Marine veteran, had traded battlefields for a quiet life in Ashton. His tall, muscular frame and calm demeanor made him a respected figure in the community, though respect often came grudgingly in a town with old biases. Beside him, Vanessa, a no-nonsense nurse with a fiery resolve, was the unwavering balance to his quiet strength. They were returning from a dinner celebrating her recent promotion, their rare night out together filled with laughter and love. Their conversation faded as they pulled into the dimly lit gas station to refuel. Logan parked near the pump, stepping out of the truck with the fluid ease of a man who had seen and endured far more than most. Vanessa stayed in the truck, scrolling through her phone, while Logan began filling the tank. The peaceful evening took a sharp turn as the screech of tires announced the arrival of another vehicle. A black pickup truck pulled into the lot, its occupants laughing loudly. 4 white men climbed out, led by Jackson Colt, a lean but muscular man in his late 30s with a permanent sneer etched on his face. His leather jacket and faded jeans did little to disguise the hostility radiating from him. "Hey," Jackson's voice cut through the quiet. "You think you own the place, parking here like that?" Logan turned slowly, meeting Jackson's gaze with calm eyes. "Just filling up," he replied evenly, his voice low and steady. "Yeah, well, that was our spot," Jackson shot back, his companions chuckling behind him. Their laughter was the kind that thrived on intimidation. Vanessa, sensing the shift in tone, glanced up from her phone. Her sharp instincts told her this wasn't just a random confrontation. From her vantage point, she noticed how the men positioned themselves, spreading out slightly as if to box Logan in. Logan, unfazed, closed the gas cap and turned to face them fully. "There's plenty of spots here. No need for trouble." Jackson stepped closer, his smirk widening. "Trouble? You think I'm looking for trouble?" His tone dripped with mockery, but his posture said otherwise. Behind him, one of his men muttered, "Look at this guy acting all high and mighty." Another chimed in, "Bet he thinks he's too good for this town." Vanessa's hand moved subtly toward her bag. Inside was her concealed carry firearm, always with her for situations like this. She didn't draw it but kept her grip firm, her eyes locked on Logan. Logan's gaze never wavered as he addressed Jackson. "We're not here to make enemies. Why don't you and your friends enjoy your night?" For a moment, the tension hung in the air, heavy and electric. Then Jackson let out a sharp laugh. "Sure thing, boss," he said, taking a step back. But the look in his eyes wasn't one of defeat. It was a promise. As Logan returned to the truck, Vanessa leaned toward him. "They're not done," she whispered. "I know," Logan replied quietly, starting the engine. "But let's not give them a reason to start something." As they pulled out of the gas station, Vanessa glanced in the side mirror and saw the men watching them go, their laughter replaced by something darker. Jackson stood with his hands in his pockets, his smirk still firmly in place. The drive home was quiet, the earlier joy from their evening dulled by the encounter. Vanessa placed a reassuring hand on Logan's arm. "You handled that well." Logan nodded, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Sometimes walking away is the best option," he said. But in the back of his mind, he knew Jackson and his crew weren't the kind to let things go. Behind them, headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as they followed the Carters down the quiet road. The Carters' home stood at the edge of a quiet neighborhood, its modest size and well-tended lawn a testament to years of hard work and care. The calm of the night was deceptive, cloaking the storm that was about to break. Logan and Vanessa were settling in for the evening, their earlier encounter at the gas station, a distant memory they hoped would fade. Logan, sitting at the kitchen table, sipped his tea while Vanessa tidied up, humming softly to herself. Then the lights flickered. "Power outage?" Vanessa asked, glancing toward Logan. Logan's instincts, honed by years in the Marines, kicked in immediately. He rose from his chair, moving toward the window. Outside, the once serene night was now filled with shadows that moved unnaturally. "Stay here," Logan said quietly, his voice calm but firm. Before Vanessa could respond, a loud crash shattered the quiet. A rock hurled through their front window. Laughter followed, cruel and mocking. Logan looked out the window and saw Jackson standing in the yard, his gang spread out behind him. "Hey, Marine!" Jackson shouted, his voice cutting through the air. "Why don't you come out and play? Or are you hiding behind that wife of yours?" Vanessa moved beside Logan, her expression tight with worry. "They followed us," she said. "Yeah," Logan muttered, his jaw clenching. "And they're not here for a chat." Logan opened the front door slightly, stepping out just enough to face the gang without exposing himself entirely. "You've made your point," he called out, his voice steady. "Leave now before you regret this." Jackson grinned, his smirk illuminated by the flashlight in his hand. "Regret? Oh, we're just getting started." He gestured to one of his men, who began tearing at the flowers in Vanessa's carefully tended garden. Another kicked over a potted plant, the ceramic shattering against the driveway. Logan took a step forward, but stopped as Vanessa's hand gripped his arm. She gave him a knowing look and slipped away toward their truck, where she kept her concealed firearm in a locked box under the seat. Vanessa returned moments later, her weapon in hand and her expression calm yet steely. She moved toward a side window, positioning herself where she had a clear line of sight but remained out of view. "Logan," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "I've got your back." As Logan tried to de-escalate the situation, one of the gang members, a wiry man with a crowbar, approached the front door. "Come on out, hero," he sneered. "Or do we have to come in and drag you out?" Vanessa's voice cut through the tension. "You take one more step, and I'll make sure you regret it." The man froze, glancing toward the window where Vanessa's silhouette was faintly visible. He raised his hands mockingly. "Oh, looks like the wife's got a gun. Scary." Ignoring the taunts, Vanessa fired a single warning shot into the air. The sharp crack of the gun echoed through the yard, silencing the gang's laughter. Jackson's smirk vanished, replaced by a furious scowl. "You think that scares us?" he barked. "You just made this worse for yourselves." Turning to his crew, he shouted, "Take the house. Teach them a lesson they won't forget." The gang hesitated, the warning shot still ringing in their ears. Some looked uncertain, glancing at each other for reassurance. But Jackson's glare left no room for defiance. Logan, now standing fully in the doorway, raised his voice. "You step onto this porch and it'll be the last mistake you make." His calm authority sent a chill through the gang, but Jackson's fury kept them moving forward. The first man approached the porch, crowbar in hand. Vanessa, from her position, fired another shot, this time striking the ground inches from his feet. He stumbled back, dropping the crowbar and raising his hands in surrender. "Enough!" Jackson shouted, his frustration boiling over. "If you're too scared to do it, I will." He marched toward the house, fists clenched, his eyes locked on Logan. The night outside the Carter home remained tense, with the gang's voices echoing through the yard like distant thunder. Inside, Logan and Vanessa moved silently, their unspoken understanding guiding their every step. Logan's eyes scanned the windows, his mind already calculating the best way to defend their home without escalating the violence further. As Logan checked the locks on the doors, memories of his time in the Marines surfaced like fragments of an old film reel. Years of grueling training had forged him into a man who thrived under pressure. One flashback hit vividly. Logan and his unit pinned down during a covert operation overseas. Enemy fire rained down, but Logan remained calm, directing his men with precision. His ability to assess threats and think several steps ahead had saved lives that day. Another memory followed, teaching younger recruits how to disarm an opponent with nothing but their hands. "The key is control," he'd told them, his tone steady. "It's not about brute strength. It's about knowing when to strike and when to hold back. These lessons echoed in the present. Logan's hands were steady as he moved through the house, positioning furniture as potential cover and mapping out a mental strategy for what might come next. He was no stranger to danger, but this was different. This was his home, his family. Meanwhile, Vanessa stationed herself by the side window, her firearm resting firmly in her hands. Her heart raced, but her grip never wavered. Vanessa's no-nonsense attitude was a product of her upbringing in a tough neighborhood where self-reliance was a necessity. Her father, a man who believed in preparing for the worst, had insisted she learn how to defend herself. She remembered the weekends at the shooting range, his deep voice guiding her as she fired round after round. "You never know when you'll need to protect what's yours," he'd said, placing a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder. Those lessons had stuck with her, and they echoed now as she watched the gang pacing outside. She wasn't just a nurse or a wife tonight, she was a protector, ready to stand her ground. Vanessa glanced at Logan, who gave her a brief nod. They didn't need words to communicate. They trusted each other implicitly, a bond forged through years of partnership and shared struggles. Outside, Jackson's taunts grew louder. "What's the matter, Marine? You're supposed to be some kind of hero, right? Come out and prove it." Logan ignored the provocation, his mind focused on the plan forming in his head. He motioned for Vanessa to stay low and moved to the back of the house, where the gang's pickup truck was parked just beyond the fence. As Logan crouched by the window, another memory surfaced. He'd once been in a similar situation overseas, tasked with neutralizing an armed group without civilian casualties. His team had called it impossible, but Logan's precise tactics had turned the odds in their favor. Now he applied the same calm strategy. He noted the gang's movements, their lack of discipline, and their overconfidence. They weren't soldiers. They were bullies, relying on fear to get their way. And fear wouldn't work on Logan Carter. Vanessa's voice brought him back to the present. "They're getting closer," she whispered, her tone steady but urgent. Logan nodded, moving back toward her. "Stay ready," he said. "We'll let them make the first mistake." As the gang began circling the house, Logan and Vanessa prepared silently. She watched as Logan positioned himself near the front door, his broad shoulders squared and his eyes locked on the movement outside. "You've got a plan, don't you?" Vanessa asked, her voice soft but certain. Logan allowed himself a small smile. Always. The bond between them was unshakable. Logan trusted Vanessa's aim as much as he trusted his own instincts, and Vanessa trusted Logan to guide them through the night. They had faced challenges before, though none quite like this. The sound of heavy footsteps on the porch brought their attention back to the present. Jackson's voice rang out once more, dripping with arrogance. "Time's up, Marine. We're coming in." Logan and Vanessa exchanged a final glance, the tension in the room thick but not overpowering. Together, they were ready for whatever came next. The night was heavy with tension, the kind that prickled the skin and heightened every sound. Logan stepped onto the front porch, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the faint glow of the porch light. He was unarmed, his hands at his sides, but his presence radiated an unshakable calm. The gang turned toward him, their taunts fading into a murmur of confusion and curiosity. Jackson Colt stepped forward, his smirk widening as he realized Logan was alone. "Finally, the hero shows himself," Jackson sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. Logan's deep, steady voice cut through the night. "You've had your fun, Jackson. But it ends now. Take your men and go." Jackson chuckled, glancing back at his crew. "Go? You think you can just step out here, say a few words, and we'll run away? You've got guts, old man, but guts won't save you tonight." Logan's gaze didn't waver. "Guts didn't bring me out here. Strategy did. You've already lost, Jackson. You just don't know it yet." The gang shifted uneasily. Logan's words carried an authority they couldn't ignore. For the first time, cracks appeared in their bravado. Jackson, sensing the hesitation, barked, "What are you waiting for?" "He's bluffing. We own this town." Logan took a step forward, his voice calm but razor sharp. "Do you? Or do you just think you do? Because if you're so powerful, why are your men starting to doubt you?" The gang exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken by Logan's composure. Jackson's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. As Logan held the gang's attention, Vanessa moved silently to the back of the house. Her steps were deliberate, her breathing steady as she approached the pickup truck parked just beyond the fence. As Logan crouched by the window, another memory surfaced. He'd once been in a similar situation overseas, tasked with neutralizing an armed group without civilian casualties. His team had called it impossible, but Logan's precise tactics had turned the odds in their favor. Now he applied the same calm strategy. He noted the gang's movements, their lack of discipline, and their overconfidence. They weren't soldiers, they were bullies, relying on fear to get their way. And fear wouldn't work on Logan Carter. Vanessa's voice brought him back to the present. "They're getting closer," she whispered, her tone steady but urgent. Logan nodded, moving back toward her. "Stay ready," he said. "We'll let them make the first mistake." As the gang began circling the house, Logan and Vanessa prepared silently. She watched as Logan positioned himself near the front door, his broad shoulders squared, and his eyes locked on the movement outside. "You've got a plan, don't you?" Vanessa asked, her voice soft but certain. Logan allowed himself a small smile. "Always." The bond between them was unshakable. Logan trusted Vanessa's aim as much as he trusted his own instincts, and Vanessa trusted Logan to guide them through the night. They had faced challenges before, though none quite like this. The sound of heavy footsteps on the porch brought their attention back to the present. Jackson's voice rang out once more, dripping with arrogance. "Time's up, Marine. We're coming in." Logan and Vanessa exchanged a final glance, the tension in the room thick but not overpowering. Together, they were ready for whatever came next. The night was heavy with tension, the kind that prickled the skin and heightened every sound. Logan stepped onto the front porch, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the faint glow of the porch light. He was unarmed, his hands at his sides, but his presence radiated an unshakable calm. The gang turned toward him, their taunts fading into a murmur of confusion and curiosity. Jackson Colt stepped forward, his smirk widening as he realized Logan was alone. "Finally, the hero shows himself," Jackson sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. Logan's deep, steady voice cut through the night. "You've had your fun, Jackson, but it ends now. Take your men and go." Jackson chuckled, glancing back at his crew. "Go? You think you can just step out here, say a few words, and we'll run away? You've got guts, old man, but guts won't save you tonight." Logan's gaze didn't waver. "Guts didn't bring me out here. Strategy did. You've already lost, Jackson. You just don't know it yet." The gang shifted uneasily. Logan's words carried an authority they couldn't ignore. For the first time, cracks appeared in their bravado. Jackson, sensing the hesitation, barked, "What are you waiting for?" "He's bluffing. We own this town." Logan took a step forward, his voice calm but razor sharp. "Do you? Or do you just think you do? Because if you're so powerful, why are your men starting to doubt you?" The gang exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken by Logan's composure. Jackson's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. As Logan held the gang's attention, Vanessa moved silently to the back of the house. Her steps were deliberate, her breathing steady as she approached the pickup truck parked just beyond the fence. The truck was their escape plan, and Vanessa knew disabling it would tip the scales in their favor. With her firearm drawn, she crouched by the rear tire, carefully aiming at the valve stem. A soft pop echoed as she punctured the tire. She moved to the front, repeating the action with precision. From her position, Vanessa glanced back toward the porch, catching a glimpse of Logan standing firm against the gang. She whispered into the small radio clipped to her belt. "It's done." Logan's subtle nod was her only acknowledgement. He raised his voice, drawing the gang's focus back to him. "What's it gonna be, Jackson? Walk away or stay and regret it?" Jackson's fury boiled over. "You think this is a game?" he shouted, stepping closer to Logan. "You think you can scare us with words?" A low hiss interrupted Jackson's tirade, the sound of air escaping from the truck's punctured tires. Jackson's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes narrowing as realization dawned. "You!" he growled, spinning back toward Logan. "Your little wife thinks she's clever, huh?" Logan's expression didn't change. She's more than clever, she's prepared, and now you're trapped. Jackson's fists clenched, his smirk replaced by a snarl. You'll pay for that, he spat, turning to his men. Take them down, now! The gang hesitated, the air thick with uncertainty. Some glanced at the truck, realizing their escape was compromised. Others looked to Logan, their confidence eroded by his unflinching calm. Do it! Jackson barked, his voice cracking with desperation. 3 gang members surged forward, their movements uncoordinated and chaotic. Logan took a step back, luring them toward the house and away from Vanessa's position. Inside the house, Vanessa repositioned herself near a side window, her firearm trained on the advancing men. She fired a warning shot into the ground, the sharp crack freezing them in their tracks. Next one won't miss, she called out, her voice steady and clear. The gang members halted, their confidence crumbling. Jackson, however, was beyond reason. You're all useless, he roared, shoving one of his men aside. I'll do it myself. Jackson charged toward the porch, his fists raised. Logan met him halfway, his stance unyielding. When Jackson swung wildly, Logan dodged with practiced ease, grabbing his wrist and twisting it behind his back in one fluid motion. You made a mistake coming here, Logan said evenly, his grip unrelenting. And now, you're going to answer for it. The night erupted into chaos as Jackson's gang surged toward the Carters' home. Logan stood tall on the porch, his broad frame illuminated by the dim glow of the porch light. With years of military training guiding him, he was prepared for what came next. The first gang member lunged forward, a crowbar clutched in his hand. Logan sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it sharply. The crowbar clattered to the ground as the attacker howled in pain. Logan shoved him aside, sending him tumbling down the steps. Another man rushed from the side, attempting to tackle Logan. Logan dropped low, using the man's momentum to flip him onto the hard ground with a thud. Logan's movements were precise and controlled, every action aimed at neutralizing the threat without causing lasting harm. Stay down, Logan barked, his voice sharp and commanding. The downed attackers groaned but didn't move, their confidence shattered by Logan's swift takedowns. Jackson watched from a distance, his face twisted in frustration. Get him, he shouted. But his men hesitated, their earlier bravado fading. Logan's unyielding presence was dismantling the gang's unity, one move at a time. Inside the house, Vanessa stayed positioned by the side window, her firearm steady in her hands. She tracked the gang's movements with sharp precision, her calm demeanor masking the adrenaline coursing through her veins. 2 gang members crept toward the back of the house, likely hoping to force their way inside. Vanessa aimed at the ground near their feet and fired. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed in the night, halting them in their tracks. You try that again, and the next shot won't miss, Vanessa warned, her voice cold and steady. The men froze, their bravado replaced by fear. They raised their hands and backed away, retreating toward the yard where Jackson stood. Vanessa's heart pounded, but her hands remained steady. She glanced toward the porch, where Logan was holding his ground. Their eyes met briefly through the window, a silent exchange of reassurance passing between them. As another gang member attempted to sneak around the truck, Vanessa fired again, this time hitting the side mirror. The loud shatter startled him, and he dove for cover behind the vehicle. You're surrounded by better shots than you, Vanessa muttered under her breath, her lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. Realizing his men were outmatched, Jackson stormed forward, his frustration boiling over. Enough, he roared, shoving one of his own crew members aside. He stomped up the porch steps, his eyes locked on Logan. You think you're some kind of hero? Jackson snarled, his voice dripping with venom. You're just a washed-up soldier who doesn't know when to quit. Logan stood his ground, his expression calm but resolute. I know exactly when to quit, he replied evenly. And you're about to find out when to stop pushing your luck. Jackson swung wildly, his fist aimed at Logan's jaw. Logan stepped back, letting the punch sail past him, then countered with a quick, controlled strike to Jackson's midsection. Jackson staggered, gasping for air, but his rage fueled him. He charged again, this time aiming lower, trying to tackle Logan. Logan sidestepped and grabbed Jackson's arm, twisting it behind his back. With a sharp movement, he forced Jackson down onto the porch, pinning him firmly. "You're done," Logan said, his voice low and firm. "This ends now." Jackson struggled beneath him, his fury giving way to desperation. "You don't know who you're messing with," he spat. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Logan replied, leaning closer. "You're a coward who hides behind his gang because you can't stand on your own." Logan released Jackson and stepped back, giving him space to get up. Jackson staggered to his feet, clutching his side and glaring at Logan. "You should have just stayed quiet," he hissed, his voice shaky. "Quiet doesn't fix anything," Logan replied, his tone unwavering. "But neither does pointless violence. Walk away while you still can." For a moment, Jackson seemed to consider it. His gang stood frozen, unsure whether to follow his lead or retreat. The tension hung heavy in the air, the night eerily silent, except for the faint rustle of leaves. Jackson let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "This isn't over," he muttered, retreating down the steps and signaling his men to follow. As the gang retreated into the darkness, Logan remained on the porch, his eyes fixed on their backs until they disappeared entirely. Vanessa stepped out of the house, her firearm still in hand. "Think they'll be back?" she asked quietly. Logan shook his head. "Not tonight, but this isn't the end." The adrenaline slowly faded, leaving a quiet stillness in its wake. Logan and Vanessa surveyed the damage: broken flower pots, a shattered window, and the faint tire marks of the gang's truck. Vanessa exhaled deeply, lowering her firearm. "We did what we had to," she said. Logan nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And we'll keep doing it if we have to." As they stood together on the porch, the first rays of dawn began to creep over the horizon, casting a soft light over their battered yard. Despite the wreckage, the Carters felt an unshakable sense of resolve. They had faced down hate and violence, and they had won, not just with strength but with dignity and unity. The faint wail of sirens broke the stillness of the early morning, growing louder as squad cars pulled up to the Carter home. Red and blue lights illuminated the wreckage of the night: broken flower pots, scattered debris, and the jagged remnants of the porch window. Logan and Vanessa stood side by side, their faces calm but weary as officers exited their vehicles. Several neighbors, drawn by the commotion, lingered at the edge of the property. Some whispered among themselves, while others watched silently, their faces a mixture of concern and awe. The lead officer approached Logan, nodding respectfully. "We received multiple calls about a disturbance," he said. "Are you both all right?" Logan nodded. "We're fine. The men responsible just left, but I'd suggest searching the main road. They won't be far." Another officer approached Vanessa, glancing at her firearm. "Ma'am, is that yours?" Vanessa held her ground, lowering the weapon but keeping it visible. "It is, and it's registered," she said firmly. Within minutes, radio chatter confirmed that the gang's vehicle had been intercepted a few miles away. Officers returned with news that Jackson and his men were in custody. Charges were already piling up: attempted assault, property damage, trespassing, and illegal possession of weapons found in their truck. Logan watched silently as the officers worked, his steady presence commanding quiet respect. As the last squad car pulled away, Logan and Vanessa sat together on the porch steps, the adrenaline finally ebbing. The soft glow of dawn painted the yard in warm hues, a stark contrast to the chaos it had witnessed hours before. Vanessa broke the silence first. "Do you think it's over?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Logan sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's over for now, but men like Jackson don't disappear. There's always another fight waiting." Vanessa placed a hand on his, her grip firm yet comforting. "We'll face it the same way we face this, together." Her words brought a small smile to Logan's face. He turned to her, his eyes filled with quiet admiration. "You were incredible out there. Calm, sharp, fearless. I don't think I've ever been prouder of you." Vanessa returned his smile, her expression softening. "You've always been my strength, Logan. But tonight, we reminded ourselves that strength isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing what's worth fighting for." Logan nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. They had defended not just their home, but their dignity, their values, and the bond they shared. By mid-morning, neighbors began trickling over, offering quiet words of support. An elderly woman, Mrs. Jenkins, approached the porch, her hands clutching a plate of cookies. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did last night, it took courage." Logan accepted the plate with a humble nod. "Thank you, ma'am. We just did what we had to." Another neighbor, a middle-aged man named Thomas, stepped forward. "You know, people around here don't always stand up like that. It's inspiring." He hesitated before adding, "If you ever need help fixing that window, let me know." The interactions, though brief, hinted at a shift in the community's mindset. Conversations about racism, resilience, and courage began to ripple through the neighborhood, sparked by the Carters' actions. Vanessa, always the pragmatist, stood with her hands on her hips, surveying the damage to their yard. "Well," she said with a wry smile, "at least the flowers can be replanted." Logan chuckled, the sound deep and warm. "We'll rebuild. That's what we do." As the sun rose higher, the Carters found themselves alone again, the yard quiet save for the occasional chirp of birds. Logan stood, offering Vanessa his hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's clean this up before it looks like a battlefield forever." Vanessa took his hand, rising with him. Together they began picking up the pieces, their movements unhurried but purposeful. The scars of the night would remain, on the house, on their hearts, but they were stronger for it. For Logan and Vanessa, the battle wasn't just about defending their home. It was about standing firm against hatred, proving that resilience and unity could triumph over fear and violence. Their story, though rooted in one night, would echo far beyond it. And as they worked side by side under the morning sun, one thing was clear. The Carters were ready for whatever came next. The days following the attack brought an uneasy calm to the Carter household. The shattered window had been replaced, the garden slowly restored, but the psychological weight of the night lingered. Logan and Vanessa knew the fight they had faced was just one battle in a much larger war. Logan often found himself staring out the window, his mind racing. The arrest of Jackson and his gang was a temporary victory, but the deeper problem, racism and hate, remained. He couldn't shake the thought that Jackson was just a symptom of a larger issue festering in the community. One evening, as Logan sat at the kitchen table, Nate, a local teen Logan had mentored during his time as a coach, stopped by. The boy's voice was hesitant as he recounted how Jackson's gang had bullied others in the neighborhood for years, their actions emboldened by a lack of accountability. Hearing this, Logan's resolve hardened. "I can't just stand by anymore," he said to Vanessa later that night. "These kids need guidance before they're pulled into something they can't escape." Vanessa, her arms crossed but her expression understanding, replied, "So, what's the plan?" "I'm going to mentor them," Logan said firmly. "Not just the ones who are already struggling, but every kid I can reach. If I can show them there's another way, maybe we can stop this cycle before it starts." Vanessa, too, felt the pull to act. While Logan focused on the younger generation, she turned her attention to the women in the community. The thought of others feeling as vulnerable as she had that night haunted her. During a conversation with a neighbor, Vanessa learned that many women in the area shared her concerns. "Most of us wouldn't even know how to handle a situation like that," the neighbor admitted, her voice tinged with fear. That's when Vanessa decided to organize self-defense workshops. Using her nursing background and her personal experience, she crafted a program designed not just to teach physical techniques, but to instill confidence and preparedness. "I'm not just doing this for us," she told Logan one evening as they worked on flyers for the workshop. "I'm doing it for every woman who's ever felt powerless. They need to know they're stronger than they think." The workshops and mentoring programs began to take root, gradually transforming the community. At first, attendance was sparse. Some people were hesitant, others skeptical. But as word spread about the Carters' dedication, more began to join. Logan's sessions became a safe haven for young men who had once felt lost. He shared his military experiences, teaching discipline and resilience while emphasizing the importance of respect and unity. His lessons were practical, but laced with the wisdom of someone who had seen both the worst and best of humanity. Vanessa's workshops became a source of empowerment for women of all ages. She taught them how to stay vigilant, how to respond in high-stress situations, and, most importantly, how to reclaim their confidence. The bonds formed during these sessions created a ripple effect, strengthening the community from within. One afternoon, Logan and Vanessa stood side by side at a town hall meeting, speaking to a room filled with neighbors, local officials, and even some former skeptics. Logan's voice was steady as he addressed the crowd. "We can't change the past," he said, "but we can shape the future. This fight isn't about one night or one group of people. It's about all of us standing together, refusing to let hate define who we are." The applause that followed was more than just polite acknowledgement. It was a sign of a community beginning to heal and unite. One early morning, as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, Logan and Vanessa sat together on their porch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. Logan held a steaming cup of coffee in his hand, his other arm draped protectively around Vanessa's shoulders. The scars from the attack, both physical and emotional, lingered, but they were no longer a source of pain. Instead, they served as reminders of their resilience and the strength they'd found in each other. Vanessa leaned her head against Logan's shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Logan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We have, but there's still a lot to do." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant chirping of birds. Despite the challenges ahead, their smiles reflected a quiet determination. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. As the sun rose higher, bathing the porch in warm light, Logan and Vanessa knew one thing for certain. The fight wasn't over, but neither were they. If this story of bravery and resilience resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends and family. Let's spark a conversation about the importance of standing up against injustice and building stronger, united communities. Together, we can inspire real change.